Welcome back. This is Matthew chapter 14, and we've been talking about how we all can have the light of God's word. Anybody who lacks wisdom can ask of it, but God gives to those who ask, and those who seek will find. So we need to have that desire to connect to God on our parts. So here, what do you see when you look to Yahushua? Peter recognizes him as the Son of God, and this seems to have an effect, at least the way it's worded. But other people recognize him as a healer, so this is what they ask of. Here, when it says immediately they reached, it could mean that they took. And apparently Gennesaret is the lake, even though there is a town today that is thought to be this town. Galilee is not the lake, Galilee is the land, and Gennesaret is the sea, so this would be the land belonging to the sea, and Galilee would be the sea belonging to the land. When we say the sea of is belonging to Galilee, if that's how it's worded in the Hebrew, like shell is belonging to. So here's two contrasts here that we'll get to at the end of this chapter. Peter recognizes him and he says, "You are the Son of God." And immediately they took. And this reminds me of, "Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possessions." So here, as a result, they sent in all the land. So they took the land of the sea, and they sent to him all the sick ones. But what did they want to do? They just wanted to physically touch the edge of his clothes. And this reminds me of the woman at the well who asked him for a drink of water, something physical. And Yeshua answered, "If you knew the gift of God and who is asking you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." So if Yahushua stands before you, what would you ask him? It may depend on how you recognize him. Do you recognize him as the Son of God, the Savior of the world, or some other way? Who is he? So let's just take a look at this word here. So we have Galilee being used for the land, and then sometimes it says the Sea of Galilee. So that's where I'm wondering if it says the sea belonging to Galilee as in the land, because why in the same text would it call the same sea Galilee? It should be referring to the land as Galilee. Why would it have two different names? Because here in our chapter, we have, this was one place. So there is this place that was the village of Comfort. And from there, he crosses over to the other side. So in context, this is after his Sermon on the Mount when he's encouraging them to have faith. And something to note here is it's going to be a little similar to this chapter because a great tempest arises and he says, "Why are you fearful, O you of little faith?" So it's like they have to face these situations again and overcome them. So we're going to see Peter walking on the water. So it says he came to the other side. We're going to see that wording again. And I thought this was the same place, so I had to look it up. But this one was that village of Comfort that had the demon-possessed man. So like probably some meanings there, the reward at the end. And now compare this to Peter having enough faith to see that he is the Son of God. So here is a map, not the clearest, but it's claiming that Gadara is here, so it'd be on the other side, like his land is Galilee, this whole land here, Galilee here, and so this, the other side of the Jordan, is actually that the 2.5 tribes inherited pre-Israel coming into the land of Israel. So the Decapolis was a little bit different, hard to see here. And so it's claiming that this is Gennesaret. So when we track it here, he was in his own land, his hometown, it said, his own country. And then he went to a deserted place hearing about John the Baptist. And then he's going to go to the other side to wherever the land belonging to Gennesaret is, whether this is a town or whether it's just a land where they recognize him, but it does say the other side. So I don't know, is it a repeat of over here? Either way, there might be some kind of spiritual meaning that we can get. So this does say that it's an actual town today, but it's more like a place to go and visit because of its meaning connected with the Bible, probably. But either way, let's ask the Spirit to reveal to us what God would have us know about His Word, believing that we will receive abundantly, 100-fold. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard of Yeshua and said unto his sons, I guess he didn't kill them, this is Yohanan a Mercer who returned to life and performs wonders. For Herod detained Yohanan bound, sounds like he has a guilty conscience, or kept Yohanan imprisoned because he caught him for the sake of Herodias, the wife of his brother. I guess to maybe make her feel better. Maybe she was kind of nagging him a little, but it does say that he wanted him dead. For Yohanan said to him, it is not fit to take your brother's wife for yourself. Or it maybe just been because of this connection. And because of this, Herod wanted to kill him, but he feared the people who held him as a prophet. And on the birthday of Herod, Herod made a dance for, words missing probably, the daughter of. So they might have inserted this based on this other text that this was Herodias' daughter who danced before them all. For Herodias before all. And it was very pleasing to Herod. Because of this thing, he swore that he would give her everything that she would ask him. But she had been cautioned by her mother. She said, give me the head of Yohanan a Mercer. Then the king was grieved. It makes you think, like, at the top, people aren't motivated by money, like how most people would be like, what do you want to ask? Ask money. But at the top, they're motivated by like controlling or more spiritual things, which is funny because we're supposed to be more motivated with spiritual things, but they're kind of, it sounds more spiritual, right? Like, let's combat the spiritual forces, who's Yohanan. Anyway, then the king was grieved, but on account of the oath, and because of guests who saw him swear, he did not want to change. So he commanded that they're saying the executioner here, but I don't see how this is referring back to an executioner. It's probably just saying this for clarity. But it's really Herod who's executing him. Of course, he's using his servants. That he should right then, like immediately or without any delay, give her the head of Yohanan a Mercer. Then he cut off the head of Yohanan in the house of the prison, and they brought the head in one of the flat vessels of wood. A little extra detail there. And they gave it to the young girl, and she took it to her mother. Then his Talmudim came and carried away the body and buried it, and came and reported to Yeshua. And when Yeshua heard it, he went up into the boat and turned turned his face to go, it's a figure of speech, into the wilderness. So when the people knew it, they went after him by foot from all the cities. And when he saw so many peoples, he was filled with compassion and healed their diseases. So far, he's going to the wilderness, a deserted place. It's not saying where. And when it was evening, the Talmudim said to him, "This place is desolate, and the time is passing by. Let the people go into the villages and buy food." But Yeshua answered them, "They do not need to go. You yourselves must give them to eat." They answered him, "We have nothing here besides 5 loaves and 2 fish." Now, if they could give them spiritual food, like how Moses and like 70 elders, they feasted on God's presence, is like a way to understand it, because it's like they went to the mountain and they ate. But Moses, I think there's wording there where he was like feasting on God's presence, and this is enough to where he didn't need to eat or drink for 40 days and then for again another 40 days. So like if you got the spiritual food, it's like you become angelic. Like the manna was spiritual food, and then they wouldn't have kept hungering. But Yeshua answered them, "They do not need to go. You yourselves must give them to eat." They answered him, "We have nothing here besides 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So he said to them, "Bring them to me." And he commanded that the people should sit on the grass. It's according to your faith. They're asking for physical bread. This is what he's giving them because this is the level where they're at. What we learned in the last chapter. Why he's using comparisons, because this is going to connect them. Then he took the loaves and the 2 fishes and looked into the heavens and blessed them and broke them and gave them to the Talmudim, and the Talmudim gave them to the people, and all of them ate and were satisfied. All of the leftovers remained 12 full lumps. And the number of those who ate were 5,000 men, besides women and children. Then immediately he commanded the Talmudim to go up into a small boat and to go into the sea while the people departed. And when the people had walked, they left. He went up onto the mountain to pray. And when it was evening, he was alone on the land. But the small boat was in the midst of the sea, and they were bearing suffering, for the wind was against them. But in the 4th watch of the night, I assume this might be the final one, I don't know, it'd be interesting to know, Yeshua came to them walking on the sea. They were terrified, and because of much fear or dread, they cried out. Then Yeshua immediately spoke to them, and he said to them, "Have good trust in El," this would be Elohim, the plural form. "I am he, do not fear." Interesting to note that, like in our main manuscripts, the English ones that are translations of other languages, I don't think this had here, where it would kind of, people would be like, he's saying he's God. Or other places where it would say he's Mashiach, like directly from Matthew, and a lot of those were taken out. So you have to wonder if it was a biased translation, if they're taking out some things where it's like a direct declaration or one that could be taken that way. Sometimes corrections are made just because people might take it the wrong way for clarity, right? Simon Kepha answered him and said, "Adon, if you are him," meaning if it is you, but maybe that's how it's worded, maybe differently worded like this, "Are you he, or do we look for another?" is what John the Baptist asked. "Do you want that I myself come unto you upon the water?" And he said, "Come." So walking on the water was an indication that it was Messiah, because only Messiah should have been able to do this. So it would make sense that he's saying, "Are you he," as in the Son of God. And that's going to be good for context because he's going to say, yes, you are. Then Shimon Kefa went down from the small boat and walked on the water to come to Yeshua. And then he saw the mighty wind as he was coming and feared. And when he began to sink, but literally, he entered. We would know it's into the water, but he entered. He cried out, saying, Adon, save me. And immediately Yeshua stretched out his hand and took him and said, Man with a little faith, or faithfulness. Now, if you're following along in our Revelation study, the church of, we haven't got there yet, I was reading ahead, of Philadelphia, I believe, is, because we're on Sardis, or Smyrna, yeah, Sardis, because it sounds like sardine. I get those two mixed up. Philadelphia, that they are said that you have a little faith. Well, this could be a good thing because what did he say then in that other chapter of like 7 or 8? He's saying, why do you doubt other times, but has Peter's faith increased to a little bit? Man with a little faith, why did you fear? And when he went up into the vessel, they came and worshipped him. Okay, so it says they, like with one accord probably, saying, truth, or truly, you are the son of Eloah, God singular. And immediately they reached, or again, they took the land at Gennesaret. And so this was that one that means harp, meaning the sea. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent in all the land, and they sent to him all the sick ones. So this must be a different land than where he was, just healing all their diseases. They were coming on foot from wherever they could, and entreated him that they might only touch the edge of his clothes, and all those who touched were immediately healed of their diseases. So there was someone I was listening to who was teaching the Sod level of the Torah. So it's like the Zohar. And he was telling them that with their meditation, as long as they understood this, whatever they were connecting with, picturing deliverance with their mind for the world and things like this, that they're causing it to happen, as long as like one soul has this enlightenment, then the other ones will have it too. If you notice, sometimes inventions kind of happen in different parts of the world at the same time. So it's like this awakening that happens in people, where if one person reaches this plateau or whatever is the word there, then other people will be able to reach it as well. So this is, on one hand, you're thinking, well, Yahushua, just him being present, enables us to see what these prophets before longed to see and weren't able to, just by one person. But then it's like a multiplying effect, because all the disciples in this boat, right when they're able to recognize him, they reach this level of awakening, and then it affects the land around them. So you could argue that they were bringing him on foot before, but if we are comparing this to the other chapter that has a similar event, whether it's the same land that he comes to, which is on the other side, or not, the result is different. Last time they asked him to leave because he'd cast out the demons into the pigs, and they're more concerned about the physical. So this is a higher level of faith. Their faith is increasing. You can see before there's a storm, right? But Peter, he's asking, because they've just learned you ask to receive. And so he's like saying, if you are him, I'm willing to go out of the boat, take a step of faith and go to you. Just ask me to come and I will come to you. And that movement forward in faith of one person helped open the eyes of all the disciples, because they all saw Yahushua, but that connection on Peter's part, who's like a leader for them, helped open up all their eyes. And there just seems to be the wording here, how it's immediately, even if this isn't like the land belonging to all the Sea of Galilee, it seems like just the wording of this, right, at least, is that there's this spiritual uplifting, and now people are able to recognize him, and like there's this higher level of faith, because like before it did say he wasn't able to do many mighty works in his homeland. So this is his homeland. This is an increase in faith because of their unbelief. So either way, this just seems like we're making progress, right? So a little bit of the family gossip here. Herod Antipas was the son of Herod the Great, and it was divided. I don't know if this is between his sons. And so Herodias is the daughter of Aristobulus, who is one of the 15 sons of Herod the Great. Although not mentioned in the New Testament, she was married to her uncle, Herod Philip, who fathered her daughter Salome. Herodias left Philip to be mistress to his half-brother, Herod Antipas. If you could follow that along. I had trouble. So actually I didn't take the time to figure all that out. It sounds like a mess. So here, just like Yehoshua spoke freely, it says freely give, you have received, freely give. And he did this to the scribes. It wasn't about position. Same here with Yohanan. He's not being moved to treat people differently, but everybody, if they're in some kind of sin, it's our responsibility to let them know, even if they have the power to shut you into prison. So Yohanan wasn't afraid here, apparently, and he did have to suffer on this account. On the other hand, Herod was worried about what other people thought, and so wanted to treat people differently, maybe, instead of John, who was able to speak his mind even to the leader. And now back to Josephus's report in Antiquity of the Jews. Herod Antipas was defeated in a war with Aretas, king of Arabia Petrea, and adds, now some of the Jews thought that the destruction of Herod's army came from God, and that very justly, as a punishment of what he did against John, that was called the Baptist. For Herod slew him, who was a good man, and commanded the Jews to exercise virtue. So it does say that he regretted immediately, but because of the people, he did it, but it's the people that didn't want him to do it. But anyway, originally it says that he wanted him dead on account of Herodias. So maybe he really wanted him dead, but because of the people knowing that he was a good man, just like the Pharisees were people pleasers and they didn't want to say things that would, upset the crowd too much. So maybe he didn't want to kill him, like he regretted it because he knew people would be against that. Both as to righteousness towards one another and piety towards God, and so to come to baptism, for that the washing with water would be acceptable to him, if they made use of it, not in order to the putting away or the remission of some sins only, but for the purification of the body. Supposing still that the soul was thoroughly purified beforehand by righteousness. Now when many others came to crowd about him, for they were greatly moved or pleased on hearing his words, Herod, who feared, lest by the great influence John had over the people, might put it into his power and inclination to raise a rebellion, for they seemed ready to do anything he should advise, thought it best, by putting him to death, to prevent any mischief he might cause. Such a contrast, right? Like Yehoshua knowing all power comes from God, I do not fear a man. But you see so much like fearing of man as far as people pleasing and my own image. So he put him to death to prevent any mischief he might cause, and not bring himself into difficulties by sparing a man who might make him repent of it when it should be too late. Accordingly, he was sent a prisoner out of Herod's suspicious temper to Machaerus, the castle I before mentioned, and was there put to death. Now the Jews had an opinion that the destruction of this army was sent as a punishment upon Herod, and a mark of God's displeasure against him. So where are our eyes open to, and where do we look away from? It's interesting, like the kippah was supposed to come about because Jews were supposed to have something small and balance it on the back of their head so they keep their head down, like around people. And like this context, right, that we're not worried about what people think or like boosting our image. But when it comes towards prayer, we have our eyes opened, like to see God as he is, nothing physical, and like unashamed, see him as he is. And then he says a blessing over this bread. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Praised be you, Adonai our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And Torah only really tells us to make a blessing afterwards. So after we have eaten and are filled, we elevate the physical instead of being brought down by the physical. Now that we have been satisfied, and now we're going to bless God for this, just like Isaac ate and then was going to bless Esau, but he ended up blessing Jacob. So when we have eaten and are full, when God has satisfied us with something, we bless him with that, and then the tempter can't turn that into a curse. So here it says you have a little strength as opposed to faith. But what we can take from this is little is much when God is in it, just like the few loaves. It doesn't matter how much. If we give him what we have, then this is all it needs, because with God, everything is infinite. All that God has is without end. Because in context here, I gave before you an open door and no one is able to shut it. Yehoshua says something similar to Peter. So if you give him the little bit that you have, whether it be physical, food, nourishment, or the spiritual faith, strength that you have with God, he matches it, which makes it infinite, because everything that God has is infinite. Like if you can do a little bit of good here, good, God is good. Good is infinite. You can't compare that to the great amount of good that you think you could do over there, because it's all the same. It is not the amount that you have, but your willingness to give it that makes it much. And it is not the size of the seed that you have, but your willingness to get yourself out of the way as someone who is humble for that seed to grow into something great. So having a little faith is all you need in order to move a mountain. Here is what he said before. Why are you afraid? You have small faith, so you shouldn't be afraid. And this is what Peter is doing when he's willing to give what he has, what little faith he has, and step out of the boat. Yehoshua meets him where he's at, and they are able to walk back together. And not only that, they're able to take the land around them, whether that was literal or not. They ended up spiritually taking the land around them.